All right, everybody. How's everybody doing out there? This is Josh Reeves here with you. Welcome to another edition of the Global Reality. This is Monday, August 28th, 2017. Thank you very much for joining me here yet again for another show. I've got quite a bit to talk about. Got some news. We're going to have quite a few shows this week. We're gearing up, moving into September, and September is going to be a whole month full of celebration because this is going to be our 10-year anniversary. So I'm planning on doing some special stuff and some special videos and stuff. And that's why I've been working so hard this month and haven't done as many shows this month, because I've been trying to, as you know, to get as much done on Spellcasters 2. I wanted to have it out by the end of the month. I talked about this in the last show. I'm still happy with where it's kind of interesting though. I mean, the way, if everything stays on course as it is now, then it should be done, ready to be downloaded at least by the time we get to right around the actual date of the 10-year anniversary of the show towards the end of September. So, but again, that's why I've taking the time out from doing the show, and appreciate everybody being patient out there as I'm absent from the show to work on the film and everything. Because as I've said before, when you get in this headspace of working in a film, it really is, it's difficult. It's difficult to, and I don't want to do every show on the film because then there's got to be stuff for the actual film, and that's one thing people always know when they watch my films and listen to my show. People who've been listening and stuff for a long time. I can talk about this stuff for a long time, many months or years on the show, but then when you get to watch the actual film, it's still something totally different than what I've talked about and presented before. So, Spellcasters 2 is going to be no different from that. But I've got all kinds of little stuff planned, and different ideas I'm trying to do and things for the 10-year anniversary, because it's, I tell you, I've made it this far. It's just it's a cohesive thing between staying on top of the research, staying on top of the work, constantly. It's just the hunger, man. There's so much still left to be put together, and there's so much that's been watered down with disinfo, and I mean there's so many things out there, so there's an infinite amount of work to do. But as I've said, it's me doing the work, and that's one end of it, but everybody out there who has donated through the past 10 years, and everybody's that's helped us get these films made, and just everybody, everybody's a part of that too. And there's a lot of people out there that've been listening for, if not the entire 10 years, a good portion of that 10 years. And we still have a lot of people that have been listening for a long time, a couple of people, at least two, that have been listening since show number fucking 1. How nuts is that? Shit, man, I hear from them sometimes. It's crazy. I'll hear from people. We'll hear from these motherfuckers for like 6 or 7 years. Sometimes, I'll get an email like, I'm still listening, motherfucker. I've been listening since TruthNet Radio days. Like, Jesus Christ. So that's rad, I dig that. But, yeah, I really am, it's a testament to the work I've done, and the whole mission here and has never changed, but it's always been from day one to not just talk about, anybody can get up, anybody can do a radio show and talk about what everybody else is talking about. I never understood that. I'm when in the early days, the first couple of years, I was only on networks for the first 3 years, I think, or 2 years. Yeah, first 2 years, a little over 2 years of doing the show, and then started my own network after that. But I never understood that when I would on some of these networks, how, because I would listen to other shows and stuff, and it would just boggle my mind sometimes. Every single show would talk about the same thing every day, and it's like, who wants to listen to a network with 8 shows or something, 10 shows, and every single show, every topic's about the same shit? So that was, the beginning of that for me, when I was like, look, there'd be things sometimes if everybody was talking about it, I would talk about it too. Certain, of course, there's going to be certain topics you can't avoid, but day in and day out, just as a rule, now I would never do that. And so it's, people paint themselves in a corner, man. I've seen a lot of people paint themselves in a corner, and stuff shifts and changes. That's why after, because when I did, you got to remember, when I did the Secret Right Volume 2 back in 2011, that was already 4 years, over 4 years of me diving in and being really researching almost nothing except, well, that's not true. I was still looking at other stuff, but making the main focus of my films and a lot of the radio shows and stuff was the whole CMP thing, because I just found out about it. There had been some people in the past who had done, there's a book, the Coors Connection book, which I got very early on, which is still in my library. You've got, there was something, was it Barbara Aho and stuff like that. There were some old lists, but as far as it being on the radar of the consensus population of people within the so-called truth movement, it wasn't there. And, after 4 years of talking about that stuff and making 2 films, and, this was during the Barack Obama thing too. So I didn't even know if I would ever get to make a film. I originally wanted to make a film on the Rockwall when I first heard about it, even before I was ever making films, 2003, 2004, when I read Rule by Secrecy and heard about it. Just immediately, I was like, I want to make a movie about this, So that was my initial goal, was just to make a movie about the Rockwall. And of course, during the investigation of the Rockwall itself and learning everything I could over the course of, 4 or 5 years, I started saying, okay, well, let's look at the facts. Let's look at the mounds, the giant skeletons, the advanced technology used in the makeup of the wall. And I started saying, okay, well, if this is here, and it is what we think it is, then there's got to be other stuff like this elsewhere, And at that time, like stuff like mounds and the importance of that and why that, and none of that stuff was on my radar at all. None of that stuff became on my radar until I started researching the Rockwall. And then upon looking to find other examples of this, to my amazement, I find all these ancient sites scattered across the entire United States that all fit into this thing, and wonder why not only were we not taught that in school, that, that's a pretty obvious answer, but not only that, but why we haven't heard about this elsewhere. Why don't people talk about the fact that there's a pyramid here in the United States that's greater in its footprint than the Great Pyramid at Giza? I went there. We shot footage of it in Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 2. Right outside St. Louis. Cahokia. I mean, it's insane. And then all the stuff about, the advanced technology they had, this advanced weaponry, because, a lot of these, Moundville in Alabama too, a lot of these places, you go find these places, they'll have these interesting alignments to different solar, well, they have, some of them have solar and lunar alignments. Chaco Canyon comes to mind as one of those rare sites like that. But just the alignments of these different star systems, and also how they would parallel, how the sites themselves would parallel. There would be like the physical manifestation of the stories that are talked about in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and going through portals and going through other realms and whatnot, and different stuff like what the Freemasons are into, and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and all that. So that, I mean, that was a journey, man. I mean, it still is. I'm hoping to eventually, you know, as I've talked about, I've got volume 3 of that film series about 60% shot. But those films are so expensive to make. But I'm hoping that maybe, you know, next year or something we can pull together a way to get volume 3 out, because there's so much stuff I've been sitting on now for like 3 years. I mean, stuff I've still never talked about on the show because it's so important. I can't talk about it till, you know, it gets put in the film. And I'm just grateful that at this point, most of it, nobody's really caught on to yet. But there's all kinds of, you know, there's so many of these ancient sites across the United States. And, you know, going into that realm for a while and then now coming back with the spellcaster stuff, I've just, that's really one of the things that, looking back on this, is, you know, this is really just the beginning. This, you know, being 10 years is really, this is really just setting the stage for the stuff that's going to come and continue on in the future, with, especially with as many ideas I have for films and expanding out and trying to do other stuff. I want to try to do some sort of web series or some sort of mini series with like different episodes that are each one on a different topic. Because one of the things that's kind of become my trademark is, you know, even though you may hear of a topic that you've heard about before, what you can't really know or judge with me, and what makes me different than everybody else, is that when you hear me talk about a subject, there's generally some things in there that are, you know, different connections that are made that everybody else isn't making. And certainly with Spellcasters Volume 2, you're getting a lot of that. As I've talked about, you're lucky to get one, but I've got two big things that we'll be revealing in this film, that maybe 3 even, if you want to get right down to it, that nobody's caught on to yet. Clearly, nobody's connected the dots on yet, and we've got all the data and all the info. So, I want to make a series. I mean, look, a lot of these, I mean, look at Netflix. Netflix is like putting up all these shitty-ass different series that different TV channels have done. They put that one, Conspiracy, the Hollywood Files, that one I was on, you know, that fucking shit show, where they cut down fucking an hour worth of me talking into like fucking 2 minutes. Because the rest of it was not ready for prime time, I assure you. No, I mean, not like I was cussing or anything. I would never do that. I'm professional. But what I'm saying is, info-wise, laying out how Hollywood is CIA controlled and laying out the connections with MK Ultra and Scientology. I mean, they were they were having none of that. So I want to make a series and try to sell it eventually. I want to make at least maybe try to make a pilot or something, and maybe come up with the idea. But I want to try to make a, you know, a web series, maybe have, you know, 10 episodes or whatever. And each one's basically like me taking a topic and doing the Josh Reeves thing to it. You know what I mean? Like filtering it through my lens and giving it to you unfiltered, unwatered down, you know, whether it be, you know, one episode on the Illuminati or one episode on, you know, whatever it might be, whatever topic. And that's kind of what I tried to do with a lot of like the mini films and stuff too, you know. And also the other thing is the audiobooks. People always ask, "Oh, why don't you do more audiobooks?" Well, dude, I've done again 91 hours worth of fucking audiobooks, 91 fucking hours, 15 audiobooks in 10 years, man. It's pretty fucking huge output. The fact of the matter is there aren't enough books worthy of, I mean, there's just not that many, you know what I mean? We don't have a lot to choose from. You know, if I had unlimited budget and had more, I mean, there's all kinds of rare books out there. I see shit all the time, you know, but some of this stuff is $100, $200, $300 per book, you know. One of the ones, a couple of those books like that we were able to get over the years, they're the ones that I've never put on YouTube that are in our download shop. We've got the 10-year anniversary download collection. It's out right now. Go and get yourself a copy. It's only going to be $20. It's going to go up to $30 once the 10-year anniversary is over. For now until the end of September, you can get all 91 hours of the complete collection of all my audiobooks in there for only $20. And you have Atlantis and the Giants, and our story of Atlantis, which is our story of Atlantis is crazy, and it's got some. Both of them, I think, both have some stuff that tied into my Lost Secrets of Ancient America work. And our history of Atlantis is just nuts, because this is like internal secret society annals of their of their knowledge on Atlantis, and there's so much little things. You'll hear me talk about it and get quite animated and excited and blown away, because that's why I always enjoyed reading books that I haven't read before on air, and I've read a lot of books. You understand? So that draws. I mean, yeah, I do have read books on air that I've read before. Finding the Third Eye was one I'd read 2 or 3 times before ever doing it on air, and ended up doing it on air twice. Both versions, which are in the box set, which is out now. And yeah, after Spellcasters 2 is done and out, we will be coming out with the 10-year anniversary box set with all my films, all my work in it. We're going to have a lot of different packages, a lot of different price points, right down to some real basic, no frills package ones that, for people that can't spend very much. We'll have a low frill, and then we'll have deluxe packages, and we're even going to have some like super deluxe packages, that have, where you get basically like a hard drive, that just has everything, like an entire, all the archives I have on my hard drives, everything, just basically we'll have one like that. We'll have a lot of different ones and a lot of different packages, and but I'm not even thinking about that until after Spellcasters 2 is done and out. But now that I'm approaching towards the end of Spellcasters 2, that's what I've been talking about. I'm ready to sort of veer back towards some of the Lost Secrets of Ancient America stuff for a while, at least long enough to get that film done. That's really all I have on the agenda as far as films. I said I was going to take some time off from filmmaking after Spellcaster 2, which I am, but considering they already have 60% of the movie shot for Lost Secrets 3, it won't be near the project that this is, even though it is going to, require some funding and a budget and all that to finish. And then, so that's, for right now, that's all I have in the works as far as films for 2018. And then 2019 will be the 10-year anniversary of The Secret Rite Volume 1. So my plan is, as I've mentioned a couple of times, my plan is for 2019 is to come out with The Secret Rite Ultimate Edition. And basically, like, because both those films were kind of made right on the cusp of when the technology was, kind of still not as good and kind of getting a little bit better. But I want to make one that has, and so much has come out. There's been a lot more CMP stuff that's come out since then. I'm sure more that will come out, because as we're heading into 2019, there'll be campaign election time again, and we all know how those motherfuckers like to get active and how much they are in the news around the times of elections. It always happens every time. So that's what I'm hoping to actually be able to find out ahead of time, when one of their actual meetings is going down, and do what I've always wanted to do, which is go and, because, again, they don't make their membership lists available to the public. Well, you find out because they always do them at Ritz-Carlton hotels. And they've done them here in Dallas before too. But you find out where it is. You sit in the lobby or sit outside with or across the parking lot with a Zoom, excuse me, with a Zoom lens or something, and catch everybody going in and out of that motherfucker. That's what you do. something like that. But anyway, that's the plan for that. And also, I'll be coming out with another mini YouTube mini film here sometime in the next month or two as well. Anyway, a lot of stuff. What did I want to talk about? I enjoyed our segment. I still am enjoying that segment. I've got one of those here tonight for you for the what do you think about ... I like that because I get so many of those emails, and sometimes you can write back to somebody and it's easy to convey to them what you have to say on the subject, but other times it's just better to talk about it on the air. What was I talking about last time that I wanted to? There seemed like there was something I talked about last time that I wanted to mention again, or had another statement on. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was the Neil Sean journey thing. Yeah, somebody asked if that was the same Paula Harris, something that had something to do with Benny Hinn, and yeah, indeed it was. Yeah, that's a big thing. And I find it kind of funny because, like I said, I totally see Neil Sean's point on that. I mean, the whole thing with the comments that he made, though, about no one's going to hijack my band is interesting. Very interesting. Because, again, especially in light of what I already know, what many of you already know, and the stuff that I've got in Spellcasters, too, I mean, that's not a stretch. That just made me, I don't know. I don't feel like I really iterated on that enough on the last show, but that really made my radar go up, man. It really did. Because that's the main thing that I didn't understand and didn't get about the importance of the CMP and all that stuff in the beginning, and why I didn't understand its connections to these so-called, truth movement, patriot movement people and stuff like that, and people who were connected to Alex Jones. I didn't understand the importance of it and didn't understand why they got so scared when it got brought up at first, because I didn't understand about it being a completely fully controlled CIA front group and being a part of this much larger operation. And that's why people got so scared when you talk about it, because that really has not been uncovered. So, knowing about Paula Harris and her connection to that evangelical community and being from all intents and purposes, what I found from looking at, I found several websites and several sources that stated that she is a Council for National Policy member. That combined with her past history and connection to people and being now the spiritual advisor to Trump and this coming out, nobody's going to hijack my band. I mean, again, Look at what the CIA's been busy over the past year or two. I guess longer than that, but it seems like, I guess maybe over the past, 7 years, they've been real busy. They've been knocking off a lot of people left and right. This happens a lot. It's been happening a lot over the past several months. It's very odd. It happened last year. Guys, it's been happening for longer than that. Not just past few months. It's been happening for the past year. Because it's almost September. I remember this happened last October. It's just an odd phenomenon. I'll talk about a subject. This is so weird. I'll talk about a subject on the show, right? And I swear to you, not kidding, not making this up, not trying to be mean, not making fun of anybody. I swear to you, it's bizarre. I never mentioned it until now. It's happened, 7 or 8 different times. But I'll talk about a subject on the show, and then I'm not kidding you. Within a day for the next week, I'll get emails or comments on the YouTube videos. Hey, can you please tell me what you think about this subject? Or can you talk about this subject on a show? And I'm not kidding. It's happened 3 or 4 times on YouTube. Literally, the video that they're commenting and asking that question on is literally the video that I just did, the show I just put up, where I talk about that subject. It boggles my mind. What was that thing, that fucking thing I talked about? I can't remember what they call it. The whole thing with, the Fruit Loops being spelled different and all that shit. I talked about that. No kidding you. Within the next week, I got 20 different messages about, hey, can you talk about this? I'm like, I fucking just talked about it. You're leaving a comment on a video where I talked about it. I don't know. It's just bizarre. It's truly odd to me how that happens. It happened on the last show I did where I talked about some of the 9/11 stuff and talked about some of the Judy Wood stuff. No kidding you. I got a comment and I got an email. Hey, what do you think about Judy Wood thing? I'm like, really? You commented on a fucking show where I just talked about it. It's bizarre. Really is bizarre. I don't know. I just don't get why. I mean, it's like I don't get those questions until I talk about a subject. But anyway, I could have sworn I talked about within the last show or two. I swear to you, it's another example of that. That's why I brought it up. Because it leads me to our what do you think about ... for tonight. I could have sworn in the past, it could have been the very last show I did. May have even been. I can't remember. Maybe a couple before that. But I swear, because I was talking about Spellcasters 2, and I swear I addressed the Tupac thing. And talked about how I wasn't going to be getting into all that in this film because it's not relative to what I'm talking about as far as this. And then, I kid you not even a day or two after I talked about that, hey, what do you think about the Tupac thing? Are you going to talk about that in Spellcasters? I'm like, I swear I just said that. Just talked about that on the show. No, I'm not going to have the Tupac stuff in there. But what's interesting about that, and I don't know if I've even really talked about the Tupac stuff. I know I've talked about it some on the show through the years. But I was thinking about the other day, it's interesting because it's actually a subject I know. I mean, I'm virtually a fucking expert in it. It's crazy. And I've really not done that much on it. So, as I mentioned earlier, I will at some point. Again, there's not going to be anything in the, I don't know. I may mention something in there. We'll see. But there's not going to be a segment on it or anything. Because it's because it's a totally different kettle of fish. We're talking about a completely different thing here. A lot of people think the CIA killed him. I don't believe that. That's not true. And this person also says, "Have you seen the Tupac movie?" Anyway, so what do I think? It's kind of two questions, but anyway, I actually know a lot about the subject. Believe it or not, I actually know a fuck ton. I've spent a ton of time researching it through the years. And it's one of those things that I heard about almost immediately after his death. Started hearing about it. And kind of always, I remember because I worked in little, I worked at like a Hastings store where, books, movies, and all that stuff. So I worked at various record stores. And I remember I worked at one right around the time when Tupac supposedly was killed. And I remember what it was I was checking out a black guy or something. He was buying a Tupac CD or it was on the store. I can't remember what it was or how it came up. I've tried to think about how it came up. It seems like he just kind of strangely just kind of blurted it out. Like I was ringing him up and the guy just goes, he's not dead, right? I'm like, excuse me? I was kind of taken aback. My mind was not in that frame of mind at all, This is probably like 96, 97. It was very shortly after the whole thing went down. But he's like, he's not dead, right? And I'm like, oh, really? No, I hadn't, at that point, I hadn't really heard anything about it. But it was strange as I had a gut feeling. I remember having a gut feeling, just like on 9/11, I had a gut feeling, ended up being right. I don't know, it was when the Kurt Cobain too. I remember when I first heard about Kurt Cobain, I just knew in my gut and even though I I was 16, 17 or whatever, and I didn't really know a whole lot. I had been researching UFOs and JFK and stuff for a few years, but I didn't really know much else, and this is pre-internet, so, but I just knew in my gut when I first heard about the Kurt Cobain thing, I just knew it was bullshit. Same thing on 9/11. As soon as it was happening the day, I instinctively fucking knew it was bullshit. And the Tupac thing too. I remember hearing about the Tupac thing, and I just remember thinking, there were so many things that didn't add up, especially when you read like the official reports and you see all these official accounts. But anyway, there's so much shit on YouTube, and there's so much crap. There's so much disinfo. It's another one of those subjects, kind of like the fall thing, or any of these subjects. It's another one of those subjects where there's a shit ton of fucking disinfo. There's tons of stuff out there purporting to be the truth. There's a million different theories, and it's a rat wheel, dude. It's one of those rat wheel subjects, kind of like 9/11 or any of them. If you don't jump off the rat wheel, it will just keep you spinning on it infinitely, because there's infinitely a million different things, and that was all done by design. But it's a totally different. The Tupac thing is totally different than what I'm presenting in Spellcasters 2. It's a different thing where I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. Yeah, because the Tupac thing has nothing to do with, the CIA. Well, I'd say CIA probably isn't involved at some level, but so that's not true. But what I mean is like the Scientology thing and the black magic stuff that doesn't tie in, because it's a totally different thing here. Because Tupac wasn't murdered. That's number one. And his death was faked, and the entire crime scene, everything was staged. People talk about a lot nowadays. They talk about crisis actors, and they talk about, these people that are basically paid actors that are put on the scene to give specific narratives at the time when these events happen and whatnot. And, a lot of them proven to be, actual actors and whatnot. People pulled stuff, and, you see them in movies, and there they are, on the scene of these things like Sandy Hook and whatnot, and there they are. You can look up they're on IMDb as actors. I mean, this has happened. It's factual, regardless of what you think about these subjects. It is factual that these actors have been placed at these scenes, and we don't know how long this has been going on. It's probably been going on for decades. But as far as I'm concerned, for me, I mean, if you can show me an uncontested earlier version of this, I'd love to see it. But I mean, to me, the biggest one, and maybe one of the earliest ones, let's just say, as far as some of the more contemporary mainstream quote unquote conspiracy theories and whatnot, and conspiracy topics, the Tupac stage murder scene has, in my opinion, one of the earliest uncontested uses of this, because it's so fascinating. I mean, the whole murder scene was completely staged. The whole thing was staged. And, I watched that movie. The movie's littered with inaccuracies, of course, as you would expect from these films. Jada Pinkett Smith is actually, she's been quite vocal. She was quite vocal on Twitter, because according to her, every single scene in the movie that with her and Tupac did not happen at all. It was all completely fabricated. Not that they weren't, they were soulmates. I mean, they were even before he became a rapper or any of that stuff, So, but according to her, none of the stuff in that film with her, depicted with her and him, none of that stuff in there was real. And they also had another glaring omission. This is what's interesting about the film. And this is another one of those, remember, this is the reason why I really watch it, other than the fact I'm totally, That's the thing. I've been told it's one of those topics I know a shit ton about. I could sit here and talk about the Tupac thing for days on end. I literally know that much about it because I've studied every angle of it, and there's so many different theories and whatnot. But it's a lot of the people that have put out a lot of good information and truth on the subject, either inadvertently or on purpose, kind of squash their own efforts because they all go back to this idea that he was really killed. And I mean, all of the crime scene evidence and everything was completely staged. The proof is in the pudding of that. Stuff from like that phony autopsy picture, which, there's, his Machiavelli tattoo on his neck is not even there. It's not the same person. They switched out the body and put somebody else in its place, in his place. And, I mean, Suge Knight himself, I've myself for a long time, like a lot of people, and a lot of people still do believe that Suge Knight had something to do with it. But when you really get down to it and look at it, it's clear that Suge Knight was set up. And here's if you really want my opinion on it, Suge Knight absolutely knew. This shit is so deep, dude. It ties in with the whole Rampart LAPD scandal because Death Row Records was employing some of these LAPD cops as security. These were dirty cops. And these guys were, in with the CIA cocaine thing with crack in the 80s and 90s. I mean, hell, even one of the guys that put up some of the initial startup money for Death Row was one of the guys that was, he was cellmates with Freeway Rick Ross, the cocaine guy. So, absolutely, Suge Knight got intel that they were going to kill Tupac, and the people that were going to kill him, people that were involved with the corrupt LAPD and the Compton Police Department before it went defunct, and they were planning to kill him, and Suge was he was aware of the plan, but then, unbeknownst to the people of the plan, because Tupac was his boy, he let him know what was going on, and then inadvertently helped him fake the whole scene. I mean, all that stuff with they used blanks, they used, a double. I mean, there's even a picture of Tupac's garage shortly before his death where there's a rubber, like Hollywood style rubber double of him in the corner in his garage. Like, why the fuck would you have? I mean, this is not just like a cardboard cutout. It's a rubber, lifelike looking thing. Something you would use like like they use in RoboCop. If you watch RoboCop, the very first one, there's the scene where they're in the warehouse and they're blowing Murphy away, right? And they blow his hand off and they're just fucking him up. And then, old Red from fucking That 70s Show, remember, he's like, all right, party's over, say goodnight, and he blows his brains out. Well, if you watch closely, when I was a kid, I didn't catch this as much. You can clearly see it now once you know it's there. It's quick, do a quick edit where it goes from being actually Peter Weller to a half second later, then it's like it's a rubber mold of him, and it moves and everything and twitches and it looks just like him, and then that's what he blows the brains out of. So something like that. But I mean, they even claim these guys shot 13 rounds from 3 feet away, and Suge Knight didn't get hit once. He claimed in a video he got a bullet in his head, but he didn't. He just got shrapnel. But he claims that at one point that it was an actual bullet. No blood at the crime scene. There were actually two different BMWs. If you look at some of the pictures, some of the video, look at the rims on the BMW. They're different. What about the shot, the supposed last picture where right before they got shot, where you see Tupac looking over and they're in the car? That thing was that's a complete Photoshop. People try to argue, oh, they didn't have Photoshop in 96, 97. Yeah, they did. Photoshop was invented in 88. And if you had a Macintosh in the 90s, yeah, I remember a friend of mine, we had this party concert thing back in 1996. This was even before Tupac died. And that was the first time I ever saw it, where he was making these like backstage passes for people. And he took this like, he was like, watch this. And he took this like picture or whatever from like an anime character, and he totally cut it out and superimposed it and pasted it over onto something. I mean, that was it. So, and again, it was invented in 88, but that picture is totally fake. And the key you can tell is if you look closely at some of those pictures, you can see where some of the bullet holes are already in the car, in the exact spot where they were later show the bullet holes. If you look close, you can already see on the car. And look closely, do a zoom in and look closely at the ignition switch. There are no fucking keys in the car. There are no keys in it. But, and also, so the whole thing with it was, what they did, they set it up Hollywood style. Because Tupac had already been working on movies at that point, and he'd been thinking of ways to do this, and he was hinting at it for a long time. In all of his records and all the stuff, he was coming out with like a new record label that was, euthanasia, life after death, all this stuff. So he had all this, resurrection, Jesus symbology, Machiavelli, and that was his like code name. Suge Knight even talks about this in an interview. The interview where Suge Knight says explicitly, as he's admitted this several times, Suge Knight has admitted several times that his death was faked. And people just chalk it up, oh, well, that's just Suge trying to take the heat off of himself. No. Listen to what he says. He talks, there's a couple of times where he talks about the person who did Tupac's autopsy, and the medical examiner, the guy who supposedly cremated. He's like, ask yourself why the guy who supposedly, and that's the word Suge uses, is supposedly cremated Tupac. Ask yourself why he was given $3 million personally by me and then retired, and nobody's ever seen him again ever since. He's like, what about all those songs? That was always the thing for me when I, first heard about. Was just, I remember hearing on MTV News, but he got out of jail, he got shot 5 times, and then he had a finite amount of time, and he's put out, there has been more Tupac releases since his supposed death than there was while he was alive. But in Suge's own words, he's like, think about all them songs. He's like, if he's dead, but you're still seeing him and hearing him, right? And Suge's own words were, it's mathematically impossible. That's the best way I've ever heard it put. He's correct. But mathematically, if you add it up, it's mathematically impossible that he recorded all that material. And stuff where he's talking about things that didn't happen until after he was dead, and he's rapping about them in these songs that he's supposedly recorded. Come on. So yeah, they absolutely faked the scene. In that movie, I mean, that was one of the main things in that movie. Besides the fact that he was rapping the song, they have a fucking scene in the movie where he's singing live, and he's singing the song "Hail Mary" live. Shouldn't even come out until after he was supposedly dead. It came out on the Machiavelli album. So why you would have that glaring omissions like that, and then they pepper in little things. It's like there's little things it's just strange. It's a strange movie because for as much stuff as is wrong with it, there are some little things that they pepper in there, truth-wise, that probably go over most people's heads. But if you've looked at this, there is some truth in that movie that they've peppered in. But of course, the whole thing with the shooting is completely wrong. It doesn't even match the official story at all. What nobody ever mentions is that if you go and read the original reports of the time when it happened, the entourage left, the MGM Grand, all that. So they had that supposed thing with Orlando Anderson, that whole stage, all of that was staged. All of those incidents were staged. It was the whole thing was staged. Even before that, all the diss tracks back and forth with Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, All that stuff was staged and set up from the beginning. But then it started getting, but people ask me about Notorious B.I.G. No, there's no conspiracy there. There's people that say there is. No, the motherfucker's dead. No, they killed him. And he was collateral damage for selling the narrative of the Tupac thing. But there was reports that when the shooting happened, that Tupac was taken away and flown away in a medical helicopter, a medical ambulance, and flown to the hospital in a medical helicopter. Now, the interesting thing about it is that if this was a real shooting, because I never understood why when you saw the car, both of the tires on the passenger side were blown out and the rims were fucking dented as shit. And Suge Knight claims that that's because he hopped over a median trying to get away. Well, that doesn't make sense because when you read the official reports of the cars in the Caravan, they were boxed in. You had 3 lanes and you had cars. They were basically boxed in on all sides. They had a car that was in front of them. It just doesn't make any sense that nobody tried to follow the car that the shooters were in. They had a Caravan full of people. Nobody ever talks about it. They just always botch every aspect and everything that doesn't match the original story. They had this big Caravan full of people. They had their personal security with them, guys with guns. Then there's the stuff about how they were told not to bring their guns. I think maybe only one of them did. Another person always gets left out of this is MC Hammer. Hammer knows something. You're laughing, motherfuckers are laughing like, Hammer, what the fuck's he know? Hammer knows something. Please, Hammer, don't hurt him. Hammer fucking knows something because it always gets left out. You would think, don't you think it's kind of think about if you were on the scene, if you were in a car, especially if you're a famous person, a famous rapper like fucking Hammer. I've only seen him talk about it. There's not very many examples of here. He has talked about it on camera before, but there aren't very many examples of it. It seems that people have gone out of their way to keep this kind of a rep, but Hammer was there. Hammer was in a green Hummer, a Humvee. He was in a green Humvee, and he was about 2 to 3 cars back from the vehicle Suge Knight and Tupac were traveling in when the shooting happened. And people forget, he was on Death Row Records at that time. He was a Death Row Records artist. Fucking Hammer. And he was in Vegas that night, and he was there, and nobody ever talks about it. And they sure as fuck didn't show that in the movie. The where the cars are at in the movie and all that's wrong. They always leave out the fact too that when the caravan of cars left the MGM Grand, they all went to Suge Knight. Suge Knight had a house in Vegas at that time, and his parents were all in town at the time. They always show the narrative that they always put out in any video or any movies or anything is that the caravan left the MGM Grand. They were going to this club, and that's when the shooting happened, and that's it. But that's not what actually happened when you read the official reports. They always leave out the fact, this is another interesting clue, that the entire caravan, including Suge and all the other follow cars, went to Suge Knight's house first. Now, what's interesting about this is that in the reports, it describes them, Tupac and Suge going, I guess he had a gated house, so they went in, the rest of the follow cars didn't go on the gate, they stayed out. Supposedly Suge had to get something in his house, and that's the story. But I think that's when they did the switch. Or they did something. I think that's when they did the switch. They maybe switched out put the rubber double in there. Because, put it in a seatbelt or whatever, and it's going down, the windows are dark. Hey, it's probably going to look like Tupac. But there was these reports of people that say they saw him being carried out on a medical helicopter. There's also video footage of talking to somebody from law enforcement right after it happens, and one of the reporters mentions it too and says, we had a report of the medical helicopter, but all the official statements say that he was carried to the hospital in an ambulance. But going back to what I was talking about, Suge and the blown out tires, So the shooting happens, he's shot, and supposedly Suge hops the curb and starts going back the opposite direction on the other lane of other side of traffic, going back the direction they already came. He lived in Vegas. He knew where everything was at. He starts driving in the opposite direction of where the hospitals are at, and then comes to a stop somewhere else. It was like he was intentionally trying to get him and the car and Tupac away. And they had this big entourage. Nobody in the entourage could chase down the supposed shooters. You would have thought that one of the cars that had 10 people there, somebody would have chased. Nobody did. That's always seemed strange and odd. And then these reports that he was taken away in a helicopter. Now, what's interesting about the helicopter thing, this is truly bizarre. This is where I'm going back to the what I was talking about just a bit ago, the whole crisis actors thing. Give me just a second here. Get back to my info. So you have this interview, and there's an interview with an alleged eyewitness of the shooting. It's a young blonde woman. This video's on YouTube. You can go and watch it. And she describes seeing the medical helicopter come land and take away Mr. Shakur in the helicopter, and she states that he had been shot. This entire exchange, interestingly, this entire exchange is completely, totally crisis actor, fake news, whatever you want to call it. The big clue that that will tip you to this when you watch this clip, because to anybody else, it would just seem real. But look closely at the microphone. You know how the news organizations always put their logo or whatever, ABC or the I for CBS, so they always put that on the logo. Look closely at the microphone. It's got a 0 on it. So Zero News is the organization that's doing this interview, or Zero News is on the scene. It's utterly, totally fake. But the question is, if he really was taken away in a helicopter and the double was taken and then cremated, why make a fake news story with a lady where you're describing being taken away in a helicopter? You know, why would you do that and give it away if that's what really happened? Well, again, they ended up changing the narrative after the fact. So even though they had already shot this thing with the helicopter, they didn't ultimately end up needing it. Now, how do we know that this was fake, and how do we know it was staged, besides just being the fact that there's no Channel Zero fucking news? I mean, that's the biggest dead giveaway of the whole thing. Not only that, the woman's holding a camera, a video camera. That means there's probably somewhere there's videotape of the alleged helicopter, right? But we've never seen that. People had already, please don't take that I'm claiming I discovered this, because I did not discover this, but up to the point when I had discovered this on my own, I had not heard about it. I subsequently found out people had already been onto it and found out, but I found out about this a couple of years ago on accident, because I had been looking at some of this stuff and I had watched that clip because I'd heard about the helicopter thing. So I'd watched that clip, and I remember the woman's name. Her name was Paige Himmis. Paige Himmis, that was the woman's name. And I was somewhere a couple of years ago, I don't remember if it was in a hotel room when I was filming Lost Secrets, or whether I was somewhere eating and they had a TV on. I can't remember where I was. But I was somewhere, and on the TV, wherever I was, there was, you know, they have all those fucking shows now. There's not goddamn a million of them. Extreme Makeover, this, you know, house builders and, you know, whatever. They come and remodel shit. Well, it was one of those called Extreme. It was Extreme Makeover Home Edition is what it was. And it was Extreme Makeover Home Edition with Paige Himmis. And I was like, wait, why do I know that fucking name? I know that fucking name. Where do I know that name? So after I got home later, I looked it up. Sure fucking enough. The only alleged eyewitness being interviewed by this fake Channel Zero News is the same Paige Himmis, who's now a big TV star, an entrepreneur, and creator of this Extreme Home Makeover Home Edition. Not a fucking coincidence. I mean, that was when, oh my God, she's an actress. That was the whole thing. And there's pictures of her. There's a picture of her somewhere. I don't remember where she's with Tupac. So a lot of people have speculated that she was maybe a secret girlfriend, a girl on the side. She had some kind of connection to Tupac that we don't know about. And, you know, the fact that she's, you know, prior to his death, it's either from a club or a music video shoot or something, but it's clearly her. The picture, you can see, it's clearly her. And she's she's walking right behind Tupac, like she's with his entourage. So she's there with him before his death. She's in this fake, you know, seeing the helicopter news interview thing. And then, you know, she goes on to be a reality TV show star. And there's so much of this stuff. There's the other fascinating thing is that, just like I was talking about earlier, when I worked at the record store, and the black guy came up to me and was like, "You know, he's not dead, right?" And I said, "No, well, why do you say that?" You know, and he was like, "Well," he's like, "Look at this." He's like, "Look at this video." Apparently, there's like a video where he was wearing like some Jordans or something. He was like, "Is he wearing these Jordans they weren't even out for like, you know, they weren't even conceived of until a year or two after he was dead, supposedly dead." And he had mentioned that. And there was something else he mentioned. What was it? There was something else this guy mentioned. What was it? I can't remember. Anyway, what's crazy is that there's this blew my mind when I heard about this. Let me find it. So, I don't have time to get into all this. I'm sorry, even the person that asked me this. I'm going to make a little mini film about this later on down the road. Because like I talked about earlier, even though it's a topic a lot of people have talked about, you still got to have my spin and my perspective and filter it through my lens, and get what I bring to the table on this subject. But, there's a lot of people that think that he's actually still been recording music all this time. All evidence points that he fled to Cuba. And that's a pretty good fucking guess because, of course, his aunt, who was in the Black Panthers with his mother, she's still I think she was either the first or the only. I think maybe she's the only woman on the America's Most Wanted list for murdering a police officer or something. But she fled to Cuba, and he still had that connection because that was the whole, all that East Coast, West Coast stuff, all that was concocted. And they were really worried about the lid blowing off this larger, agenda. So that's his fake death and his stage death. This is what you get to look at. That's why the Machiavelli thing was next, and he wasn't going to be referring to himself as Tupac anymore. That's what his symbolic death. It's the death of him as that character. Because when you really look at it, that's all he was doing was playing a character. Even when you go back and listen to some of his songs, those diss tracks, they were doing back and forth. Like, what was that one? God, the fucking song was brutal. Hit 'em Up. Yeah, that was the name. Hit 'em Up. That was the name of it. Whew, brutal. Brutal. Oh, that song's brutal. It's still brutal today, but I can really hear it now. If him, all that stuff was, it was just character stuff. Really just playing a character. So that was really what his death was the death of this character and him becoming this, this new person. But a lot of people think he's still been making music ever since, and he's been changing. He's been putting like pitch shifters and stuff on his vocals. And I have to tell you, man, examine some of that stuff for myself and knowing, what his voice and his cadence and all this stuff. And I know music and I know singers, and everybody's voice is like it is like a fingerprint. It's, you can have people that can impersonate people and do a really good job, but even the best impersonators, when you really listen, you can always tell that they're not the real person. But there's a lot of extreme stuff. I mean, there's people that think that he's, there's like 50 different rappers that have been active since since he died over the past 21 years or something, that have actually all been Tupac. And I think some of it's crap, but I think some of it is believable. I think the one that blew me away the most was like the whole, what was the No Limit Records thing with like Master P and all that, which of course Snoop left and went to after Death Row. Supposedly there's people that believe that all the Master P stuff, all the C Murder stuff, essentially almost like 3 or 4 different rappers from that record label actually were all the actual voice of Tupac, and then these characters like Master P and whatever portray them into the public, but on the recordings it's actually Tupac. And supposedly he's had people that what they call frontmen who've been doing this for him for years. And the one, I've heard about this stuff for a long time. And again, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know. The one that got me though, a few years ago, and just really listening to it and then hearing the stuff brought up in audio editors and having vocal processing, kind of undoing the vocal processing that's there. That Casanova the Don. Look that up. Casanova with a K. Kasanova. Casanova the Don in the song Mystery. This guy Casanova the Don, he's a rapper from Atlanta. Is widely believed, and I believe myself, is widely believed to be one of the current frontmen for Tupac. Meaning the actual Tupac is writing these songs and recording them and then putting them out as this guy named Casanova, and this guy named Casanova is fronting like he, did all the recordings. But what's interesting, there's not very many interviews with Casanova. If you listen to the interviews with Casanova, he's dropping all over the place. There's one where I swear to you, man, he not only is he not denying, he straight up says at the beginning of the interview, he's not dead, he's still alive, of course. And then he kind of backs off some of it. I don't know, I don't want to give that away. I don't want to say this, that, or the other. But there's times when you can hear him in this interview. You can hear another voice in the background, like there's somebody else listening on the interview, and you can hear them talking, because you'll hear 2 voices sometimes. And I swear, man, if you listen, you can hear in the background a voice that sounds like it's Tupac. But this guy Casanova has these songs, and it's unbelievable. The guy's voice. Let me put it like this: if this guy, okay, let's just say this is really this guy Casanova doing this rapping, then he should. I mean, he's the greatest impersonator of all time. What's fascinating is that people have taken the songs, right, and they've applied vocal processing to it. What he does is Tupac uses pitch shifting to make the voice deeper. So he makes it deeper, and he did this on his own records too. And you can actually go back and apply pitch shifting to stuff on his original records and hear that it's the same voice. So it sounds real deep when he's singing the Casanova stuff. You take the pitch shifter and then push it up and correct the pitch back to normalize it to what it would normally be, and my fucking God, it's him. It's him. And this song that he did called Mystery, it blew me away, because it's the narrative. To me, it's got to be the true narrative of what happened, and it's a narrative not anybody has put together. You know what I mean? So it's not like this guy just made this song up. It's nuts. I'm trying to see if I've got the lyrics here. But he's describing what happened the night of the shooting, and not only that. Here's what's fascinating: he describes in detail the blanks being used. You're not going to shoot 13 times 3 feet away and only hit one person 4 times and not hit anybody. Give me a break. But this song, when the guy did the pitch shifting to it, you can hear clearly it's the original Tupac. You can hear it. It's him. It's the cadence. It's the phrasing. And you can just hear his spirit. But he says, let me tell you what happened. It's been 16 years, still stuck in a dark cage, living in my mind, thinking about that fateful day. 9796, I remember like it was yesterday. I got a lot to say. They're going to make a thug nigga cry, how the media said that I died, but I'm still breathing. Who do you believe in? Everything they said was a lie. You see, listen. We was in Vegas getting faded in the city of sin. I had a bad feeling that night after the fight at the MGM. Can you feel me? We left on the telly on the way to the club. These hoes pulled up right behind us. What he's referring to is these women that pulled up behind them and said, oh, hey, it's Tupac. Can we follow you to the club? What's interesting is when you go and read you can pull their reports, their actual reports from the scene. And all 3 of these women who were supposedly in this car, all 3 of their stories are different. The type of car they were in was different. The position of where they were at was different. In the report, it says they were in front of the caravan and they heard shots coming from behind them and then they saw the white car. In the movie, it's completely different. They pull up next to them and they're on one side and the guy comes up and starts shooting them while the girls are running. I mean, it's completely, totally wrong. Anyway, continuing on with the Casanova lyrics here to the song Mystery. My adversary steady plotting on my desk, squeezing bullets to my name on my chest. I heard gunshots, but it got weird. Instead of bullets, only smoke appeared. Okay, that's a reference to the blanks. That's blanks being used. When you fire blanks, the smoke and everything comes out from the gunpowder, but there's no bullets. Next thing I knew, 2 men in suits just standing there. They opened the door, grabbed a nigga by his feet, let my head hit the concrete. It was a nightmare, dragged on the street. Scars on my back, looking at the white Cadillac before a black bag over my head. I couldn't believe what I happened to see, a nigga who looked just like me. Dressed like me in the passenger seat, but it can't be me. Sitting there next to Suge, I heard another 4 shots and it can't be good. I got to find a way is what I said. Next thing I know, a blow to the head. And that's it. That's the song. If you listen, what he's describing there, ladies and gentlemen, is what they would refer to in military terms as an extraction team. The 2 guys in black suits appearing, they black bagged him. They had a military, they brought in, who knows, whether it was CIA or somebody. They had somebody in a military style operation come in. That's what he's describing is an extraction team. They put the dummy in place. There was 4, they shot it 4 times. Because again, there was originally 13 shots is what was reported were shot. So you had the initial blank shots, then you had the 4 shots, which were how many shots were put in Tupac, and then he's black bagged, and the next thing I know, a blow to the head. So he basically got knocked out and taken away in the helicopter from an extraction team. Now, what's fascinating about this, if that's bullshit, there's a video that came out. This is just so fucking nuts. There's a music video that came out. I can't remember the name of it. Heaven Got a Ghetto or some shit like that, I think is the name of it. Can't remember. That's what it was. I can't remember that's the exact name, but it was something Heaven Got a Ghetto or some shit. Watch that video. And note at the beginning that it takes place the day following when he was supposedly was killed. And it's a helicopter landing in New Mexico and him getting out and falling on the ground and these nurses coming out and taking care of him, essentially. So there's a video that came out very shortly after he died, I'm sure people at the time were thinking, like, what is this? What is this supposed to mean? Because then we didn't have all the stuff we have now, the stuff about the helicopter story and all that. It wouldn't have made sense. It makes total sense at the time when go back and look at it now. And so, again, this was beyond, a lot of the stuff we have, a lot of these CIA, people making these deaths look like suicides and the rest of it. Here we have an opposite thing going on where it appears that somebody in the higher ups had a vested interest in faking his death, but getting him out there also, which, considering that the CIA was after his family his whole life, they were trying to get his mother, they were trying to get his aunt, tracking the Panthers. It seems very strange and odd that the CIA would want to kill him, but yet they would fake his death and bring in an extraction team like that and stage this whole thing. So again, there's so much about this. It's another one of those cases where there's been so much that's been said and so much that's been put out there, a lot of which isn't true. But of course, there's been people who've supposedly seen him, and there's a lot of fake shit out there too. That's one of the things when you're onto something is when you see a lot of the fake shit, just like the whole giant stuff, the giant skeleton stuff. We know giants existed. We know that the skeletons have been found. There's been news reports. I found hundreds of news reports going back 200-300 years. Giant graveyards found in Ohio, but then what do we see? We see tons of fake videos with fake giants and Photoshop shit, right? Just same thing with the Tupac thing. I mean, everybody knows he's in Cuba, but of course there's been all this fake stuff, fake proof that he's in Cuba, fake videos, fake Photoshop pictures. And again, that's all a part of the conspiracy. It's all a part of poisoning the well and making further people think it's bullshit by propagating and putting out this phony fake stuff. That's how they do it. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. I hope I answered some of the questions there that whoever the listener had questions about that. Yeah, again, it's another one of those things. The reason I'm not talking about it or bringing it into the spellcaster things because it doesn't fit in with everything else that I'm portraying and the rest of the stuff that I'm showing, getting across here, particularly tying into with Volume 1 and the rest of it. But it is a subject that I know a lot about, and I'll probably make a mini film or something on it down the road. But there's tons more I haven't talked about. But yeah, I mean, Suge Knight multiple times has stated, they were about to try to send Tupac back to prison, all the rest. I mean, he got set up on all this. Every one of the criminal cases that he had, virtually, he was set up on every one of them. So, and Suge Knight himself said he would fake his death before he would go back to prison on something he didn't do. Absolutely. But, again, I'm not saying fucking Suge Knight is a fucking angel. Clearly, the guy, I mean, he was involved with dirty cops and he was involved with high level guys, himself. But when you really look at it, it makes no sense that he would have been involved in killing Tupac if he was really killed. It doesn't make any sense when you look at what happened. I mean, look at the way it went down. I mean, why would somebody put themselves in a position like that where they would get shot too? You know what I'm saying? If you're going to have somebody set up and killed, you're not going to do it where you're anywhere near where it's going on. Why would you do that? There's no kind of upside to it. Not only that, but with the whole stage incident with Orlando Anderson in the MGM Grand where, supposedly they whispered in Tupac's ear and said something about this, somebody ripped off his chain. That came out that the whole chain thing was completely fabricated. And then, of course, somebody dropped the dime on Suge and reported him to his parole officer for being involved in that beatdown, and he gets 9 years. And then his whole record label, which was worth about $500 million at that time, about $500 million, starts getting eaten up. There's no up. I mean, that was the whole thing. They thought Suge was going along with the plan to kill Tupac. He double-crossed all those fucking ex-LAPD and those dirty Rampart cops. He double-crossed them, making them believe he was on board with the plan to kill him. Meanwhile, he was secretly informing Tupac and telling him, hey, you know, we got to complain. They're going to kill you. It's going to go down to such and such date. So after it went down and Tupac didn't, and Suge didn't get killed at the same time or whatever, boom, instantly, they're sending him off to prison for 9 years. You know, there was no ups. He basically didn't have anything to gain from it. The people who had stuff to gain from it were the people who were like Suge's wife at the time, who was dating one of the guys that was former LAPD that was involved in all that scandals, and they ended up running the label after Suge was in prison. Ran it into the ground, and people still don't know where he got all these bullshit lawsuits. So he made all this money off this record label. And then he kills Tupac, and then he gets, I mean, there's no upshot to it. But there a lot of the people too who knew about any of this stuff, just like the Kennedy assassination. A lot of the bodyguards, Tupac's personal bodyguards, a lot of these people now dead. A lot of these people were suicided. Several of the witnesses were suicided. A lot of people, and they've been going after Suge. They've been trying to eliminate Suge for quite some time, and they're trying to do it again now. With his whole case, that ties in with all this too. The whole thing about him supposedly running over that guy and all this stuff, it's nuts. Suge knows where all the bodies are buried. And he's the last guy alive that truly knows everything that went down. And if he ever gets in a position to where he can let this truth out, I mean, that's why they're fucking it, man. That's why they've been continuing to fuck Suge. Again, I'm not saying he's an angel. He's definitely been involved in some fucking criminal shit. But it's clear when you really look at the evidence, they have been trying to take him down and are still trying to take him down. I mean, this is in play right now as we speak. Because he literally knows where all the bodies are buried, and he knows all the people that this whole thing's connected to. And he's really the last person alive that could blow all this stuff open. And that's why over the past several years, he's been more vocal about, the fact that his death was faked. And I think all this stuff is going to come out eventually. You might even see him come back at some point. You may even see Tupac show back up at some point. I think it's that nuts. But it's a totally different kettle of fish than the spellcaster stuff, where you've got, well, it is and it isn't, but there just aren't any connections to, MK Ultra type stuff with this. I guess with all of it, you could say inherently there is, especially when you're talking about the music industry, and that's largely what I'm showing in this film. But, again, not making that my focus for this, but it is something I know a lot about. What else did I have that I wanted to talk about with you here? Kind of talked about that longer than I wanted to. I think we'll probably leave it there for tonight and bring it back for you here tomorrow. We'll be having shows all week here for you folks as we move into the 10-year anniversary. And our 10-year anniversary celebration will start on the 1st. I'm planning on having some special stuff this month and special shows, videos, different uploads here. So keep it locked. Be sure to add us on Facebook, Global Reality Radio Network Facebook, and Josh Reeves Filmmaker Radio Host Explorer page. That's where we post all the updates and all the newest stuff and videos, everything there. And also be sure to hit the download shop. Get yourself, if you haven't seen Spellcasters Volume 1 or 1.5, now's the time to do it. Get yourself immersed in those films as I'm trying to complete Volume 2 for release next month. And also be sure to hit our fundraiser for the 10-year anniversary. We're trying to get some gift cards and money and whatnot to raise money for new equipment here for the studio. We've got a lot of old stuff here that's really on its last leg and is not going to make it another 10 years. So we really got to get some help in here to get some new gear. so we can take the films, the radio show, the video presentations, everything to not only just continue it, to take it to a completely new level. And as I said, I've got so much info and so many plans for more films and radio shows and documentaries and all this kind of stuff. I've got enough material to go another 20 years. Literally, I'll never get it all out there, but I'm gonna do my damnedest to get it all and get as much out there as I can in the time I have here to do it. You know, the short time we all have on this earth, it's all we can do. This is our fundraising week. We've got to reach our fundraising goal for our operating costs. We've got to reach 100% of our operating cost goal by Friday. So, you know, let's go ahead and start getting some of that in early so we don't have to wait to the last minute again. Because last time we got lucky last month, we had like a grace period or something, but we're not going to have that this time. So we've got to reach our goal 100% by Friday. So this is our fundraising week. Act accordingly, please, and go there and make your contribution so we can continue this another 10 years. And I'm excited again, like I said earlier in the show, about the 10-year anniversary and all the stuff coming up for that. But none of it's possible without you folks. And I have the ability to put out a lot of stuff, but we're so limited here by our funding. And if we had more to work with and had a war chest to work with, it would be unbelievable what we could do. So all you claimers out there, all you people who claimed you're going to make big contributions and never have, now's the time to step up. And everybody else, we need you to pitch in too, because again, moving into our 10-year anniversary month and getting closer to the Spellcasters release, this is not a time for us to fail. And this is a time when we need your support more than we ever have. And I thank everybody helping us get this far. My name is Josh Reeves. We'll see you next time. Take care.